Yeah, the motion started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Denise Smiler, Chair of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. I would like to ask everyone to please silence your cell phones and all electronic devices at this time. Also, while masks are no longer mandatory, please feel free to wear a mask if you believe it is required or necessary for your own well-being. We have 5 board members present this morning, and Commissioners Manzano Diaz and
Representative. Today, Wayne serves as our casino compliance supervisor assigned to the Hollywood Morgantown Casino for the Bureau of Casino Compliance. Wayne, I'd like to present this certificate to you, and thank you very much for your service, and congratulations. And Mark, would you come up, please? So Mark Dintz, he is also receiving an honor for being a 15-year service award winner. Mark was hired on June the 8th of 2009 as an electronics engineer. Today, Mark serves as a manager of the board's Office of Gaming Laboratory Operations. Mark, thank you very much for your service and congratulations. And I'd like to give you your certificate. I have a few more people that I would like to recognize, but if you don't mind, I'll sit down for that. We also have 5 additional employees who reached their 15-year milestone, and they are Tom Waskura. Tom was hired on May the 11th of 2009 as a casino compliance representative, and then in December of 2020, Tom took the position as an iGaming compliance representative for the Bureau of Gaming Operations, and he continues to serve the agency in that capacity today. Next, we have Jennifer Courtney Martin. Jennifer was hired on June the 8th of 2009 as a casino compliance representative assigned to the Meadows Casino. Jennifer continues to serve the agency in that capacity today. Next, we have Lauren Berry. Lauren was hired on July 16th of 2009 as an electronics engineer in the Office of Gaming Laboratory Operations and still serves the agency in that capacity today. And Joshua Hoffrichter. Josh was hired on July 20th of 2009 as a casino compliance representative. In December of 2017, Josh was promoted to the position of casino compliance supervisor for the Meadows Casino within the Bureau of Casino Compliance. And the final 15-year award recognition goes to Caitlin Tortorise. Caitlin was hired on July 20th, 2009 as a casino compliance representative. In September of 2014, Caitlin took the position of investigator for the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement in the Western region, and she serves the agency in that capacity today. We also have 2 employees who have reached 10 years of service with the board who were unable to come to Harrisburg today. The first is A.J. McConnell. A.J. was hired on June the 9th of 2014 as a casino compliance representative. Since January of 2020, A.J. has held the position of investigator for the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement in the Northeast region. And finally, Scott Bretell. Scott was hired on July the 28th, 2014 as a casino compliance representative at Rivers Casino Pittsburgh with the Bureau of Casino Compliance. He still serves in this capacity today. So I'd also like to mention that the individuals in this category for 15 years, were hired in that May, June, July 2009 timeframe, of which I am one. So I am a 15-year veteran of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kevin. And congratulations to you, Kevin, for your 15 years of exceptional service to the board.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to all of you for all of your years of service to the board and to the citizens of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. By way of announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday, Tuesday, July 23rd, to discuss personnel matters pending litigation and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters coming before the board. I would also like to announce that the board has rescheduled the public input hearing relative to the license renewal application for Wind Creek Bethlehem. The hearing will now be held on Wednesday, July 31st, beginning at 10:30 a.m. at the Bethlehem Town Hall, located at 10 East Church Street, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, 18018. The public is invited to attend and to provide testimony on the renewal of Wind Creek's license. Now we again hear from our Executive Director, Kevin O'Toole.
Chair, members of the board, for today's Executive Director's report, I would like to talk about the National Council of Legislators from Gaming States, an organization referred to as NCLGS. They held their 2024 summer conference last week. And most importantly, they held it in Pennsylvania. They held it at the Rivers Casino Pittsburgh, and many of the attendees stayed at the Landing Hotel, which is the hotel that Rivers opened fairly recently. And the conference rooms were all fairly new They have had an event center for the last 4 or 5 years, but they expanded that even more into a lot of breakout seminar rooms, which accommodated this group very well. The conference brought in over 300 attendees. I know that the organizers were very pleased with that attendance. And the Gaming Control Board had 3 representatives on panels during that conference, and I was glad about that. Paul Resch, our director of the Bureau of Gaming Operations, was on a panel regarding the challenges that regulators have faced in the area of interactive gaming. Lee Capello, our director of iGaming Operations, appeared on the panel that discussed best practices for developing good regulations covering iGaming activity. And I appeared on the panel on the opening day that dealt with aspects of iGaming activity and how could you encourage legislators in other states to move forward with iGaming legislation, since there are only 7 jurisdictions that have legalized iGaming to date. And when you compare that to sports wagering, where there's been 38 jurisdictions, you can see that dichotomy. So my emphasis was on how the legislation, particularly here in Pennsylvania, has effectively allocated tax revenue so that the taxes that benefit the Commonwealth have a very broad category of the population, since one of the most significant uses of that tax revenue is for property tax reduction, which covers any homeowner who applies for that benefit. Overall, it was a very informative conference, and I am hopeful that Nickel G's will return to Pennsylvania soon to sponsor another conference. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And Commissioner Dermody also attended, and he will concur with the fact that it was a wonderful conference. Now we will hear from our Director of Budget, Dave Wren. Dave?
Good morning, Chair Smiler and board members. Today I'll present the final report of expenditures for fiscal year 23-24, which ended on June 30th. Although the year is over, we continue to receive and process invoices, so I am including some anticipated expenses in the numbers that I provide today. For the year, expenditures totaled $51.99 million against an appropriation of $52.16 million. That'll leave us with an ending balance of around $170,000. Overall expenditures increased by $4.3 million, or 9.1%, due to an increase in personnel costs. 90% of our expenditures, or $46.6 million, were for salaries and benefits, with the remaining 10%, or $5.4 million, for operating expenses. Personnel expenses consisted of $27.1 million for salaries, $19.3 million for benefits, and $250,000 for retirement leave payouts. Benefits as a percentage of salaries were 70%. Overall personnel costs increased by $4.9 million, or 11.7% from the prior year. This was a result of the expansion of our agency complement and increases in salary costs. In the operating category, expenditures were $5.4 million. The largest expenditures were $1.8 million for services. This is predominantly interagency billings to other Commonwealth agencies for services that they provide to the board. $1.7 million for rentals and leases, and $1.1 million for other operating expenses, which is predominantly database services that we use for background investigations. Operating expenses decreased by $550,000 from the prior year. That concludes my remarks on 23-24. For 24-25, our appropriation has been enacted, and the budget for the current year is $57,222,000. And that concludes my remarks.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Next is our Office of Human Resources. Okay. Good morning, Heidi. I wasn't sure who was presenting. My script doesn't say whether it's you or Joe, so this is Heidi Zula. our actually 2 week, how many weeks have you been here, Heidi?
About 3 weeks now.
About 3 weeks. Okay. So, you may proceed.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of one individual who has completed the background investigation and drug screening. Stephanie Runyon has been selected as an auditor in the Bureau of Gaming Operations. Stephanie is recommended for hire by Paul Resch, the Director of Gaming Operations. Unless you have any questions, I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the hiring action as indicated.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickernell moves that the board approve the applicant for hire as proposed by the Human Resources Director.
Commissioner Dillon seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Next is our Office of Chief Counsel.
Morning. Our first agenda item relates to a local law enforcement grant application, which will be presented by Senior Counsel Denise Miller-Schutty.
Good morning. The local law enforcement grant that I have to present to you is from the Cumberland County District Attorney's Office, who's seeking a grant of $149,569. If awarded, this would be their fifth grant. The grant is entitled to pay for full-time detective, half-time ADA, salary and benefits, overtime, training, and also miscellaneous expenses in order to conduct their investigations and enforce laws involving unlawful gaming. This matter is ready for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the board approve the local law enforcement grant application as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Dermody seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Next before the board are four petitions. These petitions will be decided on the documentary record as the Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the requested relief, or in the case of the first matter, because the board has no authority to grant the requested relief. In each of these matters, the board has in advance of the meeting been provided with all the documents filed of record. Thomas Fiore's motion to protect confidential information is the first request before the board today. In December of 2022, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint seeking to revoke Mr. Fiore's gaming employee occupation permit for conduct which occurred while he was employed at the Rivers Pittsburgh Casino. Following a hearing in the matter, a report and recommendation was issued, and on June 28, 2023, the board revoked Mr. Fiore's permit. 9 months later, on March 6, 2024, Mr. Fiore filed a motion to protect confidential information, requesting that the board make his entire case file confidential. Specifically, Mr. Fiore states that the record should be confidential because the revocation complaint incorrectly stated a date that certain actions were took place, that because he settled a wrongful termination claim with the Rivers Casino pursuant to a confidentiality clause, and finally, because the criminal charges relating to the matter were pleaded down to a summary offense. Enforcement Counsel filed an answer objecting to Mr. Fiore's request on numerous grounds, including that he failed to comply with the board regulations and provide a legal basis for his confidentiality request, as well as that the information he is requesting to keep confidential does not fall within the definition of confidential information as described by the Gaming Act and the board's regulations, and this matter is now ripe for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves that the board deny Thomas Fiore's motion to protect confidential information as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Hickernell seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Next before the board is Samuel Rice's request for removal from the board's involuntary exclusion list. By way of background, on June 3, 2016, Mr. Rice, who was 19 years old at the time, presented a fake identification at Sugar House Casino in Philadelphia, now Rivers, Philadelphia, and gained entry to the casino where he engaged in table games play for over half an hour and consumed alcoholic beverages. Consequently, Mr. Rice and the Office of Enforcement Counsel entered into a consent agreement approved by the Board on June 7, 2017. The agreement placed Mr. Rice on the involuntary exclusion list until the earlier of his 22nd birthday or 1 year from the date the consent agreement was approved by the Board, whichever occurred first. At the appropriate time, Mr. Rice, pursuant to the terms of the consent agreement, at the appropriate time, Mr. Rice would have to petition the Board seeking removal from the list. It has now been nearly 6 years since Mr. Rice was eligible to remove himself from the list or request removal from the list. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to Mr. Rice's request, given he has complied with the terms of the consent agreement, and this matter is now ripe for the Board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the Board grant Samuel Rice's petition for removal from the Board's involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Rawson seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Next before the Board is a request for removal from the self-exclusion list. On July 10, 2011, an individual with the initials SS placed himself on the list, choosing a lifetime self-exclusion option. On April 23, 2024, SS filed a request to be removed from the list. SS included with his petition 2 problem gambling assessment verification forms, both signed by certified assessment providers, confirming that assessments of SS were performed and that problem gambling treatment was not recommended. He additionally provided documentation relative to his removal from the Maryland self-exclusion list. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an answer stating it had no objection to SS' request for removal from the self-exclusion list, as more than 10 years has passed since his placement on the list. He submitted all the required documentation, and there were no known violations of his self-exclusion. This matter is now ripe for the Board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Commissioner Ralston moves that the Board grant SS petition for removal from the self-exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Hickernell seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is adopted.
The final petition before the Board today is a second request for removal from the self-exclusion list. On June 11, 2013, an individual with the initials LH placed herself on the list, choosing the lifetime self-exclusion option. On May 8, 2024, almost 11 years after her placement on the list, LH filed a request to be removed from the list. LH included with their petition a problem gambling assessment verification form signed by a certified assessment provider, confirming that an assessment of LH was performed and that problem gambling treatment was not recommended. LH did in fact have 2 violations of her self-exclusion ban, one in 2014 where she was present in a Pennsylvania casino but did not game, and a second one in 2015 where she gamed at Sands Bethworks at the time, now Wind Creek, for approximately 2.5 hours. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an answer to LH's petition for removal, saying that they had no objection to LH's request, as it has been over 11 years since her placement on the list. She's provided all the necessary documentation, and although she twice violated the self-exclusion, her most recent violation was over 9 years ago. And this matter is now ripe for the Board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickernell moves that the Board grant LH's petition for removal from the self-exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Dillon seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, presenting withdrawals and reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Chad Zimmerman.
Good morning, Commissioners. The next matter before the Board today pertains to several unopposed petitions to withdraw or surrender the credentials of the following individuals and entities: Daniel Height, Christy Joe, Aaron, Stephen Kapp, Laurent Teichen, John E. Taylor Jr., Barack Matalon, Frederick Teche, Georgina Owens, John Coaster, John Jacquemin, Daniel Gawel, Paul Edgecliffe Johnson, and Richard Meitzler. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objections to any of these withdrawals or surrenders. As a result, if the Board were to grant these requests, in every case it would be doing so without prejudice to the requester. And these matters are now ripe for the Board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the Board issue orders to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Dermody seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Next before the board for consideration are 7 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. These reports and recommendations, along with the evidentiary record for each hearing, have been provided to the board in advance of today's meeting. Additionally, the persons involved have each been notified that the board would be considering their matter today and that each would have the ability to come forward and briefly address the board. If any of the persons who are the subject of one of these reports and recommendations would like to address the board, I would ask them to come forward when their matter is called. Marcus Anastasiadis is the first report and recommendation before the board today. On October 18, 2023, Mr. Anastasiadis submitted an application for a non-gaming employee registration seeking work as an EVS attendant at Mount Airy Casino Resort. In January of 2024, the Office of Enforcement Counsel sent Mr. Anastasiadis a notice recommending denial of his application based on his criminal record and debts owed to the court. Specifically, in 2015, Mr. Anastasiadis was convicted of misdemeanor offense related to fleeing/attempting to elude police, in which he was sentenced to 2 to 23 months incarceration. In 2017, he was again charged with the same offense but a felony count and sentenced to 9 to 23 months incarceration. And in 2022, he was charged with a driving under the influence offense and admitted into the Accelerated Rehabilitative Disposition Program. A hearing in this matter was held in April of 2024. OEC appeared offering testimony and documentary evidence. Despite receiving proper notice, Mr. Anastasiadis failed to appear, and the hearing was held in his absence. Consequently, a report and recommendation was issued recommending that Mr. Anastasiadis' application for registration be denied, and this matter is now ripe for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that Marcus Anastasiadis' application for a non-gaming employee registration be denied.
Commissioner Hickernell seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Tyshawn Harmon is the next report and recommendation before the board today. The board heard Mr. Harmon's matter originally at the June 26, 2024 meeting, in which Mr. Harmon appeared and spoke to the board. This matter was tabled pending additional documentation to be provided by Mr. Harmon. Mr. Harmon did comply with the board's request and provided several character reference letters to the board. Unfortunately, Mr. Harmon notified OCC last evening that he would not be able to attend today's meeting. I will briefly review the facts in this matter that were presented to the board during the June 26 meeting. Mr. Harmon holds both a gaming employee occupation permit and a non-gaming employee registration. He previously worked as a games presenter at Evolution US LLC, and he is currently employed as a table games dealer at Wind Creek Bethlehem. In October of 2023, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint to revoke Mr. Harmon's permit and registration upon learning that while dealing live dealer blackjack for Evolution, he manipulated the cards he was shuffling to ensure that a patron would win certain hands. A hearing to address this matter was held in March of 2024. OEC appeared and offered testimony, documentary, and surveillance evidence. Mr. Harmon appeared and testified on his own behalf. Following a hearing, a report and recommendation was issued recommending that Mr. Harmon's registration and permit be revoked. However, this matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves that the board reject the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that Tyshawn Harmon's non-gaming employee registration and gaming employee occupation permit be suspended, but further moves that the suspension be held in abeyance in accordance with the terms which will be outlined in the board's order.
Commissioner Ralston seconds.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Dermody?
Yeah, I clearly that Mr. Harmon was not able to join us here today, but I would like to say to Mr. Harmon, if he's listening, that he's been treated very fairly here today, I believe, and that don't come back, Mr. Harmon.
Thank you, Commissioner.
The next report and recommendation before the board today stems from Jessica Key's request to lift the suspension of her gaming employee occupation permit. By way of background, Ms. Keys held a permit and was employed as a table games dealer at Valley Forge Casino. In March 2022, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Ms. Key's permit after receiving notice that she had been charged with several felony and misdemeanor offenses after she and a co-conspirator are alleged to have forced their way into a victim's home and assaulted and threatened the victim and her family. A hearing on this matter was held in April of 2022, and subsequently the board issued an order June 15, 2022, continuing the suspension of her permit. In September of 2023, Ms. Keys filed a request with the board to lift the suspension of her permit, stating that she had been acquitted of the felony charges and was only convicted of misdemeanors. OEC filed an answer objecting to the request, and a hearing was held December of 2023. OEC appeared offering testimony and documentary evidence. Ms. Keys also appeared on testified on her own behalf. Following a hearing officer issued an order permitting Ms. Keys to file character statements in support of her. Ms. Keys did file several character reference letters, and an additional hearing was held March of 2024, allowing her to provide additional testimony on the submitted exhibits. Ms. Keys testified that she is the sole provider for her 4 children, that the criminal incident was domestic in nature and she is not a threat to the general community. She's never been in trouble before this incident, either criminally or during her work at the casino. She further stated that she had been employed at Valley Forge for 7 years, that she loved working there, and that they had respected and supported her through all of the issues. She further testified that Valley Forge had even paid for her to move out of the area to get away from the domestic situation she found herself in with the ex-boyfriend that led to the criminal incident. The hearing officer issued a report and recommendation recommending that the suspension of Ms. Keys' gaming employee occupation permit be terminated, and this matter is now ripe for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Commissioner Ralston moves that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that Jessica Keys' petition to lift the emergency suspension of her gaming employee occupation permit be granted.
Commissioner Hickernell seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Regan?
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
David Polonsky is the next matter before the board today. Mr. Polonsky had been issued a non-gaming employee registration and previously worked as a cocktail server at Parks Casino. On October 3, 2023, OEC filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. Polonsky's registration after receiving notice he had been charged with several felony and misdemeanor offenses relating to possession and dissemination of child pornography. As a result of these charges, the board's executive director issued an emergency order on the same day suspending Mr. Polonsky's registration as requested by OEC. A hearing in this matter was held in December of 2023. OEC appeared presenting testimony and documentary evidence. Despite receiving proper notice, Mr. Polonsky failed to appear. After the initial hearing date, Mr. Polonsky contacted OHA, stating he had marked down the incorrect date for the hearing and asked if another could be rescheduled. His request was granted, and a new hearing was held January 31st of 2024. OEC appeared, however, Mr. Polonsky again failed to appear. He did request another continuance, which was granted and rescheduled. However, once again, Mr. Polonsky did not appear at that rescheduled date. Consequently, a report and recommendation was issued recommending that suspension of Mr. Polonsky's registration remain in effect, and this matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickernell moves that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that the emergency suspension of David Polonsky's non-gaming employee registration remain in effect.
Commissioner Dillon seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Next before the board is a report pertaining to Courtney Hairston. In June of 2023, Ms. Hairston filed a petition with the board alleging that she had placed a $5,000 sportsbook wager at Presque Isle Downs and Casino that turned out to be a winning wager. She further stated in her petition, however, that she mistakenly threw away the winning sportsbook ticket, initially believing that the UFC fighter she had bet on had lost. She further claimed that the fighters had similar names, and she mistook the name of a fighter that actually had lost to the one she placed her wager on, and therefore threw out her ticket. Ms. Hairston included pictures with her petition, which she claims show her hand holding the winning ticket. In November of 2023, both OEC and Presque Isle Downs, after being added to the matter at the request of OEC, filed answers objecting to Ms. Hairston's petition. A hearing in this matter was held in February 2024. Ms. Hairston failed to appear, and OEC made an oral motion to deny her petition. However, after the hearings Ms. Hairston sent an email to the board clerk requesting another hearing date, saying she was unable to attend due to a maintenance issue. Her request was granted, and a new hearing was scheduled in March of 2024. She once again, however, failed to appear. On April 5th, 2024, the Office of Hearings and Appeals issued a report and recommendation recommending that the board grant OEC's oral motion and deny Ms. Hairston's petition, and this matter is now ripe for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the board adopt the recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that Courtney Hairston's petition be denied. It is further moved that the Office of Enforcement Counsel's request for confidentiality be granted.
Commissioner Dermody seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation stems from a request to recover funds confiscated from an individual while on the self-exclusion list. On January 5th, 2024, AD filed a petition requesting recovery of funds confiscated from him. A hearing in this matter was held March 21st, 2024. OEC appeared and presented testimony, documentary, and surveillance evidence. AD appeared and testified on his own behalf. The underlying facts in this matter are that on January 26, 2012, AD placed himself on the board's self-exclusion list for a period of 5 years, signing the acknowledgments, which included an acknowledgement that he was prohibited from collecting any winnings, money, or thing of value from gaming activity while on the list. On December 27th and 28th of 2023, AD entered Mount Airy and played blackjack while still on the self-exclusion list. Upon discovering that he was still on the list, security confiscated $16,000 in gaming chips from him. AD was then charged with trespass for this incident. During AD's testimony at the hearing, he stated that he had moved to Florida soon after placing himself on the list, was back in Pennsylvania on vacation, and did not realize that he had to request removal, and believed he had no longer been on the list, as it had been 12 years since his placement on the list. He further stated that due to the length of time he had been on the list, he believes the board should waive the prohibition and he should be able to collect the entire $16,000. AD has now completed the required paperwork and has been removed from the self-exclusion list. After hearing all the evidence presented, a report and recommendation was issued recommending that AD's petition be granted in part and that he be allowed to recover the value of his last buy-in amount, which was $3,000, as that amount was not winnings. And this matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickernell moves that the board reject the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that AD's petition be granted.
Commissioner Wilson seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation before the board today is another request to recover funds confiscated by an individual on the self-exclusion list. On February 12th, 2018, SA filed a petition requesting, filed a petition to be placed on the self-exclusion list. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an answer objecting to the request of SA to recover funds. A hearing in this matter was held March 28th, 2024. OEC appeared and presented documentary and testimonial evidence. SA appeared and testified on her own behalf. Evidence presented at the hearing showed that in February 2018, SA completed all the necessary self-exclusion paperwork, choosing the one-year self-exclusion period. On January 11th, 2024, SA entered Rivers Casino Pittsburgh and gamed while still on the self-exclusion list. She placed a $5 side wager while playing blackjack and won $5,000. Ultimately discovering that she was still on the list, casino staff confiscated her winnings. She was then evicted and charged with trespass. During SA's testimony, she acknowledged that she was still on the list while gaming at Rivers Pittsburgh, but only found out that day because she had forgotten that she was required to remove herself from the list at the end of her self-exclusion period. She further stated that she had patronized a different casino in 2021, had won money, but was not identified as a self-excluded individual. After hearing all the evidence, the hearing officer issued a report and recommendation recommending that the petition be denied, and this matter is now ripe for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickernell moves that the board reject the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that SA's petition be granted.
Commissioner Wilson seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries.
That concludes the matters of the Office of Chief Counsel. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, Chad, and Steve. We will now have the Bureau of Licensing matters presented by the Director of the Bureau of Licensing, Sean Hannon. Sean?
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. Today's first licensing matter for your consideration is the approval of a sports wagering manufacturer license for AGS LLC doing business as American Gaming Systems. AGS is licensed in good standing as a slot machine, table game, and interactive gaming manufacturer. Under the Gaming Act, the board may use an abbreviated process to consider the application of a currently licensed manufacturer. The Bureau of Licensing, Office of Enforcement Counsel, and the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement have reviewed the application for a sports wagering manufacturer license for AGS LLC, and I have provided you with the results of that review. I have provided you with a draft order and asked that the board consider the order to approve the sports wagering manufacturer license for AGS LLC. This would be their initial license. In the initial agenda, it was marked as a renewal. This is an initial license.
Thank you.
And the Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Commissioner Ralston moves that the board grant the sports wagering manufacturing license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Hickernell seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next licensing matter for your consideration is approval of an interactive gaming manufacturer license for For the Company Ltd., doing business as For the Player and ForThePlayer.com. Formed in the United Kingdom in 2018, For the Company's principal place of business is in North Shields, United Kingdom. The company intends to supply games to licensed operators in the Commonwealth. For the Company was granted interim authorization on April 25th, 2024. The Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and asked the board consider the order to approve the interactive gaming manufacturer license for the Company Ltd.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickernell moves that the board grant the interactive gaming manufacturer license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Dillon seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have consideration of an interactive gaming manufacturer license for Relax Gaming North America LLC, doing business as Relax Gaming. Formed in Delaware on September 30th, 2021, Relax Gaming's principal place of business is in New York City. The company offers a portfolio of casino proprietary content, including games, aggregator services, and content programs. Relax was granted interim authorization on March 28th, 2024. The Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and asked the board consider the order to approve the interactive gaming manufacturer license for Relax Gaming North America LLC.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the board grant the interactive gaming manufacturer license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Dermody seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Next is the approval of a gaming junket enterprise license for Kenneth Froome Tours Incorporated. This was incorporated on January 1st, 1983, and is headquartered in Jupiter, Florida. The company provides junket and related marketing services by entering into contracts with casino operators to provide these services. The Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and asked the board to consider the order to approve the gaming junket enterprise license for Kenneth Froome Tours Incorporated.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves that the board grant the gaming junket enterprise license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Hickernell seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Regan?
Aye.
I thought I
Aye.
missed. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next, there are principal, key employee, and key qualifier licenses. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 14 key employees, for 14 principals, 5 key employees, and 5 qualifiers. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves that the board grant the principal, key employee, and qualifier licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Ralston seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also principal and key employee temporary credentials. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with the order regarding the issuance of temporary credentials for 16 principals and 8 key employees. I ask the board consider the order approving these credentials.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Commissioner Ralston moves that the board grant the temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Hickernell seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Additionally, for your consideration are gaming employee permits and non-gaming employee registrations. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a list of 943 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits and 257 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickernell moves that the board approve the applications for gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Dillon seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, there is a recommendation of denial for 1 gaming and 2 non-gaming applicants. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the order addressing the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider the order approving these denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each matter.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the board deny the gaming and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Dermody seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is withdrawal requests. In each case, the license, permit, or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I've provided the board with 1 key employee, 30 gaming, and 20 non-gaming applicants. I ask that the board consider the orders approving these withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves that the board grant the withdrawals of key employee, gaming, and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Ralston seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
And finally, we have an order to certify Concentrix Global Services Incorporated and Jumio Services Corporation, who are gaming service providers. I have provided you with a draft order and ask the board consider the order certifying these companies.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the board approve the gaming service provider certifications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Ralston seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Next is the Office of Enforcement Counsel, Cyrus Petrie. Cyrus.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 15 matters today for the board's consideration, in which we will request the approval of 3 revocations, 1 suspension, and 11 involuntary exclusions. The next 4 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed complaints seeking the revocation or suspension of licenses, permits, or registrations previously issued by the board. The complaint in each matter has been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in each complaint. The individual named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each respondent. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each matter, we will provide a brief summary of the facts and make a request for the appropriate board action.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Sarah Groody, Groody, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Renee Frazier. Mr. Frazier was previously employed as a sportsbook representative at Hollywood Casino Penn National. Mr. Frazier was caught stealing while working at a cash register and was terminated from his position. Mr. Frazier was observed voiding sales, ringing sales with an employee discount, although an employee was not making the purchase, and under-ringing items. Mr. Frazier was also observed putting money into his tip jar, meant as payment towards items. He was criminally charged for these actions and pled guilty to disorderly conduct. Additionally, he pled guilty to disorderly conduct for another unrelated offense. He has not notified the board of these charges, and he is not currently employed in the Pennsylvania gaming industry. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Renee Frazier.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Commissioner Ralston moves that the board approve the revocation of Renee Frazier's gaming employee occupation permit for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Hickernell seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Again, Sarah Grudy with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Siberia Ward. Ms. Ward was previously employed as a cashier at Valley Forge Casino. Ms. Ward was terminated from her position for criminal behavior. This included accepting cash from patrons for orders that she would clear from the register screen, or accepting cash or for orders which she never entered into her register, taking items from the food court and never paying for them, placing money which was meant as a payment for food orders directly into her tip jar, and taking money from her drawer and placing it into her own bags. She was criminally charged for her actions, and she pled guilty to disorderly conduct. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the non-gaming employee registration issued to Siberia Ward.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickernell moves that the board approve the revocation of Siberia Ward's non-gaming employee registration for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Dillon seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Michael Rowland, ROL A&D with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the key employee license issued to Dennis Aselta. Mr. Aselta was previously employed as the executive director of table games at Mount Airy Casino. During an investigation, the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement, Office of Enforcement Counsel, issued a subpoena for a sworn interview of Mr. Aselta. Mr. Aselta failed to cooperate with the investigation or honor the subpoena. During the course of the investigation, Mr. Aselta resigned from his position at Mount Airy Casino. He is not currently employed in the Pennsylvania gaming industry. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board suspend the key employee license issued to Dennis Aselta.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the board approve the suspension of Dennis Aselta's key employee license for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Dermody seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Next on the agenda is a request to revoke the Gaming Level 2 employee occupation permit issued to Christopher Salvaggio, who was previously employed at Mount Airy Casino as a floor supervisor. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement conducted an investigation which revealed that Mr. Salvaggio received substantial tips from a Mount Airy patron. Pursuant to board regulations, Gaming Level 2 occupation permit holders are prohibited from accepting tips or gratuities. Mr. Salvaggio was terminated from his position at Mount Airy Casino for his actions. He is not currently employed in the Pennsylvania gaming industry. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the Gaming Level 2 occupation permit issued to Christopher Salvaggio.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves that the board approve the revocation of Christopher Salvaggio's Gaming Level 2 employee occupation permit for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Ralston seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals who are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in each petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted, all filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, if the board orders the proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of their inimical conduct may be placed on the board's public website. Once again, in each matter, we will provide a brief summary of the facts and make a request for the appropriate board action.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. John Crowe, CROHE, Senior Enforcement Counsel for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next 5 matters on the agenda for the board's consideration stem from the same or similar set of facts. Therefore, with the board's permission, I will recite one set of facts, then ask for each individual to be placed on the board's interactive gaming and voluntary exclusion list. The following 5 individuals created multiple accounts on the Barstool Sportsbook interactive gaming platform using the personal identifying information of other individuals and funded those accounts with credit cards belonging to other individuals, then withdrew funds from those accounts into banking accounts controlled by the perpetrator. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board place Taquan Claxton on the interactive gaming and voluntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickernell moves that the board approve the addition of Taquan Claxton to the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board's involuntary interaction exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Ralston seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board place Denmoy Kushney on the interactive gaming and voluntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Commissioner Ralston moves that the board approve the addition of Denmoy Kushney to the PGCB involuntary interactive exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Hickernell seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board place Tyrell Parker on the interactive gaming and voluntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickernell moves that the board approve the addition of Tyrell Parker to the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board's voluntary interactive exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Dillon seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board place Shakia Williams on the interactive gaming and voluntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the board approve the addition of Shakia Williams to the PGCB involuntary interactive exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Dermody seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board place Sadie King on the interactive gaming and voluntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves the board approve the addition of Sadie King to the PGCB involuntary interactive exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Ralston seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Michael Rowland with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda is a request to place Shaquille Upshur on the involuntary exclusion list. A patron of Live Philadelphia Casino inadvertently dropped his wallet on the gaming floor. Mr. Upshur picked up the wallet and left the area. He then stripped the wallet of its contents and left it on a slot machine. Surveillance found Mr. Upshur and he made partial restitution. He was arrested and criminally charged with theft and receiving stolen property. The disposition of those charges is unreported. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board place Shaquille Upshur on the involuntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves that the board approve the addition of Shaquille Upshur to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Ralston seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Thomas Monahan, M-O-N-A-G-H-A-N, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Jeffrey Hiller on the board's interactive gaming involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Hiller opened an interactive gaming account on the Barstool Sports interactive sports wagering platform. He made 7 deposits totaling $13,112.40 and withdrew $3,012.40. Mr. Hiller's wagering activity resulted in him losing the entirety of the remaining money he had deposited. Subsequently, Mr. Hiller failed or refused to pay $10,100 that he owed to Barstool Sports as a result of his gaming activity. Barstool Sports closed Mr. Hiller's interactive gaming account. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the Board place Jeffrey Hiller on the interactive gaming involuntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Commissioner Ralston moves that the board approve the addition of Jeffrey Hiller to the PGCB involuntary interactive exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Hickenell seconds.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Juan Sanchez, Sanchez, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Timothy Hutchins on the board's involuntary interactive gaming exclusion list. Timothy Hutchins created and accessed 13 accounts on the BetMGM iGaming platform using the personal identifying information of various other individuals, deposited over $1,000, received bonus funds in some accounts, and wagered. The account created by Mr. Hutchins was permanently closed by BetMGM after the fraud was discovered. No criminal charges were filed against Mr. Hutchins. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board place Timothy Hutchins on the involuntary interactive gaming exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hickenell moves that the board approve the addition of Timothy Hutchins to the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board's involuntary interactive exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Dillon seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Again, Juan Sanchez. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Edward Espana Santana on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Espana Santana was intoxicated, refused to leave, and engaged in physical and verbal altercations with staff at Hollywood Casino York. He was restrained and removed from the gaming floor for his actions. Spring-Itsbury Township Police Department arrested Mr. Espana Santana. He was charged and pleaded guilty to divine trespass. Hollywood Casino York permanently evicted him from their property as a result of his actions. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the board place Edward Espana Santana on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the board approve the addition of Edward Espana Santana to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Dermody seconds.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Again, Juan Sanchez. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Natan Rozansky on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Rozansky was intoxicated, refused to leave Mount Airy Casino and Resort. He engaged in physical and verbal altercations with staff. Pennsylvania State Police troopers arrested Mr. Rozansky, which he resisted. He was charged and pleaded guilty to divine trespass and public drunkenness. Mount Airy Casino and Resort permanently evicted him from their property as a result of his actions. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Natan Rozansky on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves that the board approve the addition of Natan Rozansky to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Ralston seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Regan?
Aye.
Oh, thank you. All opposed? Motion passes.
Good morning, Sarah Colasar, Kolesar, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The final matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the petition to place Jonathan Cisneros on the involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Cisneros was ejected from Hollywood Casino Grantville and criminally charged after he engaged in verbal and physically combative behavior toward casino personnel. As a result of this incident, Mr. Cisneros was evicted from the premises and ultimately entered into a guilty plea to 1 count of terroristic threats, 1 count of public drunkenness, 1 count of harassment, and 1 count of disorderly conduct. He was also permanently evicted from Hollywood Casino Grantville. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Jonathan Cisneros on the involuntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dillon moves that the board approve the addition of Jonathan Cisneros to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list for the conduct described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Ralston seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
Thank you. The last item on the agenda today is public comment. Is there anyone in the room that would like to address the board? Excuse me. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, seeing no one, that concludes today's meeting. I don't know what happened to my mic, but anyway, the next public meeting of the board will be held on Wednesday, August 21st, 2024 at 10 a.m. at this location. And now may I please have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Dermody moves to adjourn the meeting.
Commissioner Dillon seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Manzano Diaz and Commissioner Regan for participating.
Thank you
Meeting-
so much.
The meeting is adjourned. It's close.